thevoicebeforethevoid.net.
That is an option, but I don't know if it's the best option. I mean, because I don't know. I think the variances ultimately are so minuscule.
In terms of what? Like,
in terms of like
the
experience,
idea of preference doesn't actually matter, or
right? Yeah, like just getting the most return on your investment of time. It's like, well, I mean, yeah, maybe this is a better return. Maybe this will provide more pleasure or enjoyment, or whatever it is that one might value. But so it does. But how much difference does it?
Now it's like the secretary problem all over again, where you're like, well, have I interviewed enough of them to really make the right decision? Like, I mean, you have to pare everything down to efficiency, but I don't know. Sometimes I try to talk myself into things, and I'm so repulsed that I'm like, well, maybe it's this gestalt, like maybe on the fifth dimension of things that I don't even begin to understand, there's a perfectly logical explanation for how much I loathe this. Sometimes you just trust in the sort of spirit, occluded aspect. And that may be, maybe later I'll learn to conceptualize and interpret and understand those points of loathsomeness. I don't know.
Maybe. But if not, I mean, I think that it's fine. Like, it doesn't make that much difference if you just let them reside in that spiritual or unknown realm. The secondary problem. Okay, it's only a problem if you actually care about having optimization. But if you belie the whole value for
arguably, there's a benefit to optimization, though. Arguably, there are going to be like causes and effects that can be evaluated. I mean, to the extent that things can be evaluated on a human scale, which maybe they can't, like in geologic time, none of this fucking matters. So, we've got that going for us.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, but you don't have to go that large a scale, like just even like a little bit larger scale than how we spend the moment. It's like, well, so it could optimize this moment, this day, this year, this life. How much difference does it really make if it just put no effort into optimizing it and just experienced it as it came? It can just as easily be, like assume a position of saying this is a value, this is of the highest value, or this is of high enough value, this is of comparable value to anything else that could come about.
I mean, is it? Yeah, I mean, at what point is it artless, though? Most people probably are just, they just go home and sit on whatever couch the furniture store sold them and watch whatever channel, comes up on the remote, and that's easy. That's the absolute default, is just like accept your station and do a series of convenient actions.
Right.
But that's its own trap as well. You can't achieve any excellence or any becoming by just lowest common denominator.
Okay, but this is the question, though. Like, so just acceptance, okay, fine. But say one doesn't go for that acceptance and puts in this effort to try and achieve some excellence or something beyond it. But how about that is impossible? It doesn't matter how much effort is expended. It's never going to be actually substantively more awesome than just accepting it as it comes.
Sometimes there is true. I mean, some people are truly excellent at individual things, and most people don't try enough of anything to know if they would or could be.
I don't know. The thing is, excellence. So, this excellence is 20% better than the average, or it's twice as good as the average, it's 10 times as good as the average. So what? I mean, like, there's this position that can be assumed that's like, oh, well, yeah, okay, excellence, but it's still on this so strictly limited scale. All that can be experienced in a human life is only what can be experienced in a human life. It's so horrendously limited that it can't be just delusion that anything is achievable, that is anything beyond what would come if you put no effort into it at all anyway.
But I think that's why you have to sort of choose your own God in this adventure. You know, that's why the aesthetic makes so much sense, because if something just inherently appeals to you, then do that. And if it costs you effort, then it doesn't matter, because you can't really evaluate effort anyway. But at least it appeals to you, and that's so it's like in some kind of pure form, appeal is appeal. We can we don't need to go any farther in reduction. If you're trying to, you know, quantify whether this appeals more because it's better, I don't know how you do that math. Like, once you extrapolate to any degree beyond that basic thing. But I think that basic thing can go a long way. I think humans evaluate beauty pretty successfully, and sometimes, you know, even put in effort to fabricate things along those lines. And maybe it's not worthwhile, but maybe it's interesting.
Maybe. You think so, huh? I mean, really, you think so? Because that can be, again, undermined. So it's like, say, yeah, like there's this appeal, and appeal exists, you know, as itself. Like, okay, you know, value to appeal, no need to try and break that down. Okay, but what if that appeal, what if the nature of appeal itself is malleable, is subject to just decision? You just decide, oh, this appeals to me because I now want this to appeal to me. I decide this appeals to me.
Well, of course, that's a huge factor. But we're also working under the premise that each of us, for some reason, is like an individual being with individual perceptions, memories, senses. And so if we can agree with that, then maybe, like, potentially we're making a language out of our individual appeals. So in that way, we're sort of casting our plot as stars in the sky, because we don't understand why we're all individuals or the extent to which we are. And that's almost not understandable. But through some sort of aesthetic of expression, we can potentially define those points. And I think that is inherently interesting. I think it's more interesting to be a person among people than it is to just sort of never express your personhood. Which I think is something that you might do if you rescind the option to follow any aesthetic or any appeal.